Non-Functional Democracy for the People, written by Sot.com. Al, January 8, 2014. Non-Functional Democracy for the People by Leon Qafzezi. 23 years of torturous transition for Albanians reflected not a fragile democracy, as we have often heard, but a dysfunctional democracy for a whole complex of reasons where the people themselves were often the object and subject. One would ask, but why not democratic? But because in the first place, for a country to be called democratic, it must lay some basic foundations in the life and development of a country that claims to be a democratic country and not the facade of democracy. The initiative of Albanian democracy was really blown away by the winds democratic blowing in our old continent, in Europe, from the fall of the Berlin Wall, and from the slow disintegration of the Warsaw Pact countries. Katowice, Ramiz Alia, was historically forced to accept supra-party pluralism. But he did not hesitate to give the relevant instructions to keep the country in capitalism, after admitting that the communist-socialist system had gone bankrupt. Not only that, but he also fabricated a smooth revolution without bloodshed, and as a director, with many years of experience, launched the characters that have led us for these 23 years. Not only that, but these characters followed his instructions with complete fanaticism, until the day Ramiz Alia passed away. We, the communists of today, said we will be the capitalists of tomorrow. The influence of Katowice in the Albanian democracy after 23 years was confirmed by the former Speaker of the Albanian Parliament, Mr. Servet Pelembaj, but also by the former Minister of Justice, Mr. Spartak Njela, but also by another MP, but after the statement was published in the newspaper, Telegraph. Unfortunately, in our country, in these years the latter prevailed, i.e. the facade of democracy, because in fact we continued in post-communism, only as a state mentality and vision, but it became a reality in an extremely ugly way. The youth and the people in those December days believed with idealism that everything was changing from the roots and that the next day maybe we would dawn a European country. But the European dream would last long, because such was the serial scenario of the Politburo. And the dream has not yet become a reality for the Albanian people. The conspirators of freedom were wrong in one thing, because they remembered that they would deceive Europe with the Albanian democratic facade. But why was not democracy functional? We ask the question again with a little baby naivety. First, because landowners expropriated by communism did not take property in a democracy. Laws upon laws came out only for owners to become those who did not actually own property but had ties to the state. So in short, the property did not go to the owner, and in some rare cases, the former owner would have to buy his property again. Albanian paradoxes. We should not forget that the country was left without a constitution for a long time, and when it was built during the time of Prime Minister Fatos Nano, it was called by the then opposition as Nano Passport, but really with that constitution with some changes we are still continuing today of this day. Then the Albanians had to go through some serious ordeals, such as the theft of people on sunny days by pyramid schemes. Then began the revolts of '97, this Black Year. The country survived the civil war, but lost about 4,000 Albanians, most of them young. None of the governors, neither today nor yesterday, has been held accountable for this tragedy, as they were not held accountable even when an entire village was blown up and people were killed, with only a few formal resignations. Likewise, on January 21st, people were killed again, and again no government official was held accountable. All this comes from a climate where human rights are not taken into account. Although Albania has signed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, this sounds today, after so many years of hypocrisy and formalism, to be okay with the internationals. The essence of this declaration is that everyone has the right to freedom of thought and expression, which means the right not to be affected by his opinions, as well as the right to ask, to receive and to disseminate, regardless of boundaries, information and ideas by any means of expression. Article 19. In a country where the sanctity of the vote has degenerated, it is sold and bought together with the deputies. Where justice in most cases breeds injustice and corruption has a free field of action penetrating into every cell of Albanian life, despite the hypocritical propaganda slogans. Where there is a lack of transparency, state, civil society, citizen, the country is going in the wrong direction, despite the fabulous enrichment of the government these people in power. Attempts for unlimited power in a country that claims to be democratic, sooner or later lead to a camouflaged dictatorship. Initially, the source of corruption is the law itself, made hastily and unilaterally, which initially seems right to was implemented, but when it conflicts with the interests of the citizen, the latter finds its weak points and maneuvers corruptly imposed by the unjust law itself. In such cases, the people say everything has a cure. So corruption starts to be fought with corruption. But it does not take you very far, despite the rapid and momentary enrichment. Because non-functional democracy for the people does not mean that it is the same for the government, no. It is very functional and beneficial for them for their narrow interests that have little to do with the interests of the country. Look at the great Albanian parliamentary spectacle. How little is said about the interests of the people and how it is buzzing about affairs and private interests. Charges and counter-charges for stealing millions. And proverbial silence. Lots of noise for nothing. But they forget that someone looks, weighs and judges this contradiction that is done to the Albanian people, who seem to be powerless to do anything. They even want to scare him with a second 97 even blacker than the first, like a gogol that they take out of their pocket whenever they want. They forget that they are a state that is monitored to the smallest nuance of cynicism, political and these unscrupulous performances. This people is no longer without God. As in the time of Uncle Enver, who cut his sword from both sides. Legally, the powers appear in the separate constitution and depoliticized institutions. This is de jure, that de facto. The powers are not divided, they are under the pressure of politics. Consequently, the facade of decentralization falls down and it seems as if in the sunlight we are again a centralized country. Not only that, but where the Prime Minister of the country has been given unlimited power even with the approval of the opposition. Citizens, through the corruption of public servants, manage to solve their problems, especially for medical services in hospitals, for services in privatization agencies, for judicial services, including in addition to lawyers, prosecutors, notaries and prison officials. Ordinary citizens are ignored if they do not put their hands in their pockets and give rewards to ensure admission to high schools, to take exams, to a job. Especially when this job is called customs, or tax inspectors, because by capture these tasks have the potential to generate fat unfair profits and get rich at the expense of the people.